What's up? How are you? What? Oh, my hair? Oh yeah, I cut it. I regret it. So I'll probably never do that again. Let's just say I did it because it's warm weather, okay? Not out of just random boredom last week. We're in our series. We're continuing our series. Happy Father's Day, by the way, to all the dads in the house. Man, we celebrate the dads. We celebrate you all for all your hard work, all your commitment to provide for your family. Man, can we celebrate some dads in the chat? Can we make some noise at our online campus, at our Vacaville campus? Let's celebrate the dads right now. There was a while that at my house, my fence was broken, and it was broken to the point where my neighbors would walk by and they'd be able to see into my yard because the fence was in such disrepair. And it took a while for me to actually get it fixed. The big reason is that I don't know how to fix anything. I am not the guy who knows how to use a hammer and nails and a screwdriver and a saw and how to buy lumber. I mean, I bought wood for the first time a few months ago, and that was an experience. Like, I was excited. That's just not me. And I kind of feel insecure being a dad who doesn't know how to fix things. Some of you here right now, you know exactly how it feels to be that one who knows how to fix stuff, how to get to work. I had to call a neighbor's friend had a son, and he brought his sons to come. And so we had this time where we spent time rebuilding my fence. I got to help mix the concrete. We got to dig the holes, and that was really fun. My shoulders and back were sore after doing that. And after about a day's worth of work, I had 4 new fence posts, and we had a new fence installed. And I didn't really do much. I just assisted, but it was a team effort. And that's how the best type of rebuilding projects are. It's not just one person. We've been talking about this guy named Nehemiah in this whole series, and he's in the middle of a rebuilding project too. You see, God has given him a vision and a heart and a passion to rebuild the walls of God's city called Jerusalem. In the Old Testament, Jerusalem was God's town. It was God's city. It was where the temple was, where God literally, his presence would be there. And around the temple, God's city was Jerusalem. But the problem was Jerusalem, as Nehemiah saw, the walls were in disrepair. And when you're an ancient city, you need walls to protect you, and also so that your neighbors, the people around you, will see you actually care about where you live. Like when my fence was broken, what it looked like, if I didn't fix it immediately, it looked like I've seen things broken and I just didn't care. That's what can happen to us when we don't get to work. As dads, we have this desire to provide for our families. We love to work, a lot of us. But the problem with that is we can almost forfeit everything else in our life. And we can justify our long working hours, or we can justify not being present at home. We can kind of have this narrative as dads, sometimes this temptation to want to check out at home instead of investing our best into our homes. And so this message is for those of us who are dads, and maybe we just need a kick in the butt sometimes. Dads, get off the couch. Do something. Put your faith to work. I'm only saying that because this last year I discovered this very addictive game called Fortnite, and there was a while where I was like, yoo-hoo. I was so distracted by this game that I started to forget my main calling. It started to really distract me from the work God has called me to do as a husband, as a father, as a dad, as a follower of Jesus. It's like I got so distracted. Any dads in the house? Any guys in the house ever get distracted? Maybe it's sports. Maybe it's work. Maybe it's a second job. Maybe it's something that has diverted your attention away from the real work God has called you to do. What is the real work God has called you to do? If you follow Jesus, if you really want to take God seriously, here it is. You build God's kingdom first. Jesus said it this way: if you seek my kingdom, all of these things will be added to you. What does that mean for us as guys, as dads, as grandfathers, as uncles? Maybe some young men in the house watching here now in Vacaville or at an online campus. What does that mean for us dudes in particular? It means that our life is not about us, and we serve for the benefit of other people. And as guys, we have a unique position to get to work. Say, get to work. Say, get to work in the chat. Here at Vacaville, say, get to work. As this project started, Nehemiah, look at what it says in Nehemiah chapter 3. It says, the builders of the wall, and it's got a lot of names here. Here's what it says. Eliashib, the men of Jericho, Zakur, sons of Hesenah, Meremoth, Meshullam, Zadok, men of Tekoa. What is the point of chapter 3 of the book of Nehemiah? It lists so many guys who have joined in this project. You see, Nehemiah was used by God to pray and to fast and to have a broken heart over the state of God's city. How could we call ourselves believers when God's city is in disrepair? And so that was week 1. And week 2, he got permission from the king. He got the clearance. He got the building permits to start this work. And in this week, the work actually begins. But the thing we see first is that it is full of people, and Nehemiah is not working. It's not just Nehemiah's thing. It is a group. It is a team. It is all of the able-bodied men. And in Nehemiah chapter 3, it lists all of these guys who are getting to work. The whole reason Nehemiah was so passionate about this project is he saw the apathy. He saw the disconnection. He saw the who cares attitude of God's people. And he brings them and he calls them together. And God brings these folks together. But here's the thing. Anytime you and I get to work, anytime us as dads is when we get to work, the real work, not just our day job, but our life job. Our life job, our homes, our marriages, our kids. Do they know God? Is there a foundation for faith? And men, we lead that conversation. It's not just mom's job. It's not just grandma's job to take them to church, and we're there too. Man, we must be at the forefront. We must be working out our own faith so that our kids can see something in us. We must lay a foundation for their faith, not just a foundation for college tuition, not just a foundation for savings, not just good vacations. It's about what we leave when we're gone. And man, when you're gone, God must be the ones to take care of your kids, dads, not you. And so we have in Nehemiah 3, all of these guys getting to work, all of these guys teaming together, and they're all working on all these different gates. There were about 10 different gates that this group was working on. Gates were the point of easiest attack from an enemy, because they weren't the solid parts of the wall. So all of these guys are working on the gates. But in Nehemiah 4, there's some enemies who are having a problem with Nehemiah's progress. Here's what it says. When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry, was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews. He said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are?" There's criticism and there's opposition. We talked about this last week when Nehemiah was already receiving criticism and attack and scandal because these other local rulers knew that if the Jewish people got some self-confidence, got some work ethic, if they put their faith to work, they know that they would be a threat to these other rulers. I think that's how our enemies think of us. If we are really following God, we have an enemy, the evil one and his minions, his team. There is a spiritual war that goes on every day. And a lot of guys, we focus on the physical war. We focus on the dollars and cents. We focus on the house. We focus on the fence repairs of life. And we can completely forget the eternal war that you and I are supposed to be fighting. But there are enemies here in Nehemiah chapter 4. They're ridiculing them. Who are these Jews who think they can do all this? They're going to be able to do, man, they're mocking them. They're ridiculing them. But in verse 6, it says, Nehemiah says, we rebuilt the wall till it reached half its height. Say half. This project has already gotten to the point where they've rebuilt half of the wall. And here's why. Here's what it says. For the people worked with what? Say this next word out loud. The people worked with all of their heart. You see, you can't be a godly man and work half-heartedly. Man, you got to get involved. You got to get to work. This is no longer a passive thing for us guys. Right now, our world needs godly men to lead, to fight for our faith, to fight in the spiritual realm with prayer, with reading our Bible, with being involved in a group, with serving. Man, this is not just something we participate and we watch. We come off the sidelines. We gear up for battle because it is a battle. because the evil one wants to devour our children into a culture that no longer loves or honors or reveres God. And God has always used men in a unique way to lead things forward. He uses women too. But men especially, there's something about being a guy where you fight and protect what you love, what you believe in. That's God's hardwiring DNA in us as guys. And the temptation is to just be passive with our faith. The temptation is to, out of fear or self-preservation, assume it's someone else's problem. But in this mighty work that happens in Nehemiah's story, it's a team effort. And all of these men have come together to fight with their faith. It says, after I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, the rest of the people, and this is Nehemiah saying, Nehemiah says, don't be afraid of these fools. Remember the Lord. Man, this is our verse for today. Listen, remember the Lord who is great and awesome. And here's what Nehemiah says to the dudes in the house. He says, fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. Nehemiah is saying, guys, we have enemies, we have opposition. But you must be the ones leading this fight for our faith. You must be the ones rebuilding your homes with God's bricks. Not just bricks and mortar, but the spiritual bricks of God, these foundational things. Reading the scriptures, praying, understanding God, talking about it, living it out, being generous with your life, being active, being engaged. Not just leaving your best at the office or the job site, but you bring your best home. You don't give your kids or your family your leftovers. Nehemiah is saying, man, the Lord is great and awesome. You must fight for your families. You must fight, dudes in the house, dads, uncles, grandfathers, young men. You must be ready to fight. But look what happens next. In verse 16, it says, from that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. That's a great metaphor. That's a great word picture for us as guys. That we work, we have a hammer in one hand. That we are active. We are putting our faith to work. We are showing up. We're working. We're bringing our best to lay a foundation of God in our homes and our marriages. But the other hand, we have a sword. We are ready to go into battle. We are simultaneously fighting on behalf of God and also fighting on behalf of our family. There is so much honor in being a warrior for God. Are you there? Are you ready? Do you realize that life is a battle? And I'm not just talking about the battle when you're trying to get your kids to go to bed. I'm not talking about the battle at work where you have battles with your boss or meetings or I'm talking about the real battle, the spiritual battle that is unseen but is more real than what is seen. The things of God, our faith, our character, who we really are deep down. Are we really embracing a life where we are trying to love God, love others? Are we really trying to show up and put our faith to work? Do we have a hammer? Do we have some tools? But do we also have a sword? Do we have the Bible? The Bible is God's weapon in our lives to cut us, to heal us, to make us healthy, to make us more like Jesus. But it's also a sword to go to war. It's a sword that we wield that has power. And it's God's words, not our power. It's God's power. That's what it looks like to be a godly man when you look at this idea. We show up to work and we show up to fight. Are you there? Do you have that tenacity? Do you have that vigor? Do you have that engagement? Do you have that energy for your faith? Where your kids and your family, your wives, your wife knows, your kids know, your family knows what you're about, what you're really about. Not necessarily just your career, but also what you believe. Do you really believe it? If you believe this, it becomes a lifestyle of threat, of attack, of intentionality. And I'm not talking about actually literally fighting people. I'm saying the fight is within. The fight is allowing God in our hearts to win. And then we go to war spiritually, in prayer, in our life with God, that we would know God, that we would grow in God, and then that we would then go with God to impact our world. That is a fight. That's a battle. And when you step into that battlefield, you get attacked. That's what Nehemiah has experienced. And so he tells his dudes, man, when you show up to work, you bring your hammer and you bring your sword. You bring your chisel and you bring your spear. That's what godly men must do every day. It's not passive. It's not complacent. And it's not full of fear. It's stepping out to fight for God, for the people we love, and especially to fight for people who don't know God yet. I can't think of any greater, more noble cause if we follow Jesus. In chapter 6, we see a moment where the progress of Nehemiah and his crew have gotten to the point where they've made amazing progress. But Nehemiah still has his accusers. Nehemiah still has the people trying to attack him. And now they start to go after his character. Now they plot ways to ambush him, ways to kill him, ways to distract him. Here's what it says in Nehemiah chapter 6. It says, when the word came to the rest of our enemies that I had rebuilt the wall and not a gap was left, Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message. Come, let us meet together in one of the villages. But they were scheming to what? Say this out loud. It says they were scheming to harm me. Man, here's the truth. When you start to live and embrace a life for Jesus, where it impacts your character, it impacts your marriage, it impacts how you spend your money and your time, it impacts how you raise your kids, here's a guarantee: you will have enemies that want to harm you. Sometimes they will be physical. Sometimes they will be people who your old friends, your old family. They don't understand why. They ridicule you. They accuse you. Sometimes it's spiritual enemies. The evil one puts a target on your back because you are now leading in your home for Jesus when before you were leading for yourself. You were leading just for your own comfort. You were leading just for your own, I don't know. But now that Jesus is in the throne of your life and you are worshiping the King, he's teaching you how to lead. He's teaching you how to fight. And he's teaching you what it means to gear up for war for him. Here's a guarantee: you will experience opposition. You will experience threat. You will experience pushback. Things that will feel like coincidences are attacks from the evil one to discourage you, to dissuade you, and to want you to cower back in fear. Nehemiah hears about these schemes. And in verse 3, he says, I sent messengers with them. I'm carrying on a great project. I cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? It says 4 times, say 4, put 4 fingers up. 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same answer. I cannot stop this work. I cannot stop this work. I cannot stop this work. I will not stop this work. You accusers, you enemies, you're not trying to meet with me. You're trying to stop God, and God has called me to rebuild, and you all are trying to stop God's work. And so, no, I will not come down. Why should I stop working for God when you don't like it? Why should I stop working for God just because you have a problem with it? 4 times they're trying to distract and accuse and intimidate. And now they're trying to go after Nehemiah's character. Now they're trying to swirl up the people. They're trying to get the appeal of the people to turn against Nehemiah. Verse 9, it says, they were all trying to frighten us. They thought their hands will get too weak for the work and it will not be completed. But this is what Nehemiah said. Remember how he prays. Remember how he's spontaneous. Remember how he's taking his faith so seriously. He's got this connection with God and he's pursued this relationship with him. And it says, I prayed, now strengthen my hands. Nehemiah knows this fight is not his own strength. This is God's call on his life. This is God's call for him to fight and to finish this work. And so he prays, God, strengthen my hands. That is such a prayer for us in the church. That is such a prayer for us as dads, us dudes in the house, that we would rise up to the leaders God has called us to be. God is calling you to lead. He is calling you to strength. He is calling you to fight for him, to fight the apathy in your life, to fight the temptation in your life, to fight the hiddenness, to fight the fear, to step into courage and work for God. And Nehemiah says, strengthen my hands. Nehemiah didn't say, this has gotten too much for me, God. He didn't say, get me out of here. I think sometimes that's the prayer we want to pray a lot of times when we're going through hard seasons, hard times, increased stress, increased pressure, increased opposition. As we look to follow God in all that we do in every area, we will experience these attacks. And we will want to feel like, God, you must deliver me from this. But just like when Jesus prayed before he was arrested and eventually crucified, he said, Father, take this cup from me. But then he said, but not my will, but yours be done. That is our prayer as well. That is our prayer, that God would strengthen our hands. In verse 10, it says, one day I went to the house of Shemaiah. He said, let us go meet in the house of God inside the temple. Let us close the temple doors because men are coming to kill you. By night, Nehemiah, they are coming to kill you. And so this guy, Nehemiah, he tries to tempt Nehemiah to go into the temple. He tries to tempt Nehemiah, say, Nehemiah, these guys are going to come get you. You've made them so angry, they're going to come get you. You need to go into the temple and close the doors. What this guy was actually saying is, Nehemiah, compromise on your faith. Nehemiah was not a priest. He was not allowed to enter the temple. But this guy says, they're coming to kill you, Nehemiah. You need to hide. And by breaking this law, this guy's actually a hired person to dissuade Nehemiah. This guy that Nehemiah is talking to was hired by Nehemiah's enemies. Because if they knew Nehemiah entered the temple, they knew that would discredit his character. You see how much they are attacking Nehemiah, how much they're scheming to try and catch him off guard. They're trying to catch him off guard. Nehemiah does not give in. He does not enter the temple. Even though they're saying you must do this out of your own self-preservation. Even though they said, Nehemiah, they're coming to get you. Nehemiah did not compromise his character. What an amazing leader. Here's what he says. Should a man like me run away? Or should someone like me go into the temple to save his life? I will not go. I will not compromise the integrity of my faith with God. I will not do that. Even if there are people trying to kill me, I will not go. Nehemiah says, I realized that God had not sent this guy. He had been hired to intimidate me so that I would commit a sin, so that they would give me a bad name to discredit me. Nehemiah has gotten so much attention because of the success and progress of this project that now his enemies are doing anything they can to try and get him to stop, to get discredited. And here's the last verse. It says, the wall was completed on the 25th in 52 days. When all our enemies heard about this, look at what the scripture tells us. All the surrounding nations were afraid, and they lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. God is calling our church to rebuild, to take the foundation and to add on to it, to address the areas where we need some new seasons of faith and grit and work, and go to work. God is calling us, especially as men of New Life Church, young men, old men, dads, uncles, grandpas. There's a special role for you, that you would get to work, that you would serve God in a way that is unique to you as a guy, with a desire to make an honorable life, with a desire to sweat, with a desire to work, with a desire and a calling to build your life with the bricks of God, to show up for work every day, not just with your computer, not just with your hammer, not just with your company car, not just with your spreadsheets, but also with the Word of God in the other hand. Your relationship with God, the power of God, the work of God, that when people look at your life and they look at the life you live, they say, this work had been done with the help of God, not you. This is the invitation. This is the call to arms for the men in our church to rise up, to be ready to fight, to be ready to sacrifice, to be ready to serve our people, our families, our loved ones, not just with money, not just with vacations and savings accounts, but with an inheritance that lasts for all eternity. When we entrust our kids and our families to Christ, we are entrusting our most prized possession to the one who will never leave them alone, never forsake them. Dads, your love for your kids and your spouse it has such a depth. But no one loves your kids or your wife or your family. No one loves your community. No one loves your church more than God does. We are privileged to fight on his behalf, to serve him, and to step into our God-given roles. Lord, show us what it means to get to work. Show us what it means to serve. Show us what it means to honor you. Show us what it means in our lives personally. What are you calling us to? Are you calling us to take our next steps with you? Is it next class? Is it to really take our Bible study and connection with you seriously? Is it to be a part of a group? Is it becoming someone who serves on a team? Is it by honoring you with our finances? Lord, what is our next step? What tools do you need to give us? What tools do we need to take up? What weapons do we need to gear up with to fight? And to not be passive, to not be a spectator, but to be someone who is engaged in the war that we can't see. That every day the evil one wants to dissuade, discourage, accuse, and bring anxiety and depression and bondage and addiction into all of the folks around us, our kids especially. Lord, we can't let that happen. We must protect our homes. We must protect our marriages. We must protect our hearts. But Lord, first, we must ask you to get to work in our lives. Would you help us? Would you show us? Would you lead us, God, to be men of God for you? Show us what that means. Lead us to that place. Birth something new. God, rebuild our hearts. Rebuild us. We commit this to you, God. Change us, God. May people look at our lives and say, you built it, not us. May people look at our marriages and our homes and say, God, you built that. You used us and you helped us, God, but ultimately it was your power. And we were just willing to get to work. In your name, amen.